Now that we've seen a demo in strings, let's move over to loops. On the left here, we see the most common loop, a for loop. The for loop has three parts to its beginning. The first part shows I have an integer called value1 that's initialized to 0. The second part here, followed by the semicolon, shows you that you'll keep going in the loop as long as value1 is less than 5. And finally, the third part right after this other semicolon shows you how you'll increment from one iteration to the next within the loop. Value1 plus plus indicates that value1 will be increased by 1. So the loop goes from 0 to 1, to 2, to 3, 4, and then stops before it ever reaches 5. So it goes through the loop 5 times, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And each time it'll print the value of value1. The second loop here shows you a while loop. The while loop shows you how it will traverse through the loop as long as a certain condition is true. In this case, I'm checking to see that value 2 is always greater than 0. Since value 2 is initialized to the number 5, right above here, it'll stay greater than 0 as long as the value keeps going down but stays above 0. So initially it's 5, and I have value 2 minus minus to decrease the value by 1. From 5 it goes down to 4, 3, 2, 1. And it'll stop completely because it won't go above 0. Each time it'll print the value of value 2. Finally, we have another for loop, but this one indicates ways to stop the loop with continue and break. So continue doesn't stop the loop completely. What it does is it goes back up to the beginning of the loop and continues the loop. It never reaches anything below the continue, if that condition is true. Next, I have a break statement which says break completely, just stop, get out of the loop. So in this case, I'm starting out with a variable named I, which has a value of 5. I minus minus says that the value of I goes down from 5 to 4 to 3 and so on. And it'll keep going as long as it's greater than value 2. If you recall, in the previous example, value 2 keeps getting decreased until it's 0. So the I variable will keep going as long as it's greater than 0. But it'll never reach 0 within the loop because when I is 2, the loop breaks. So I goes from 5 down to 4, 3, 2, and then it'll break. And finally, we have a part of the loop that says done with iteration, and it'll print the iteration that it's getting done with to indicate whether it's reached the last part of the loop or not. This curly brace here shows that we've completed this loop, and finally we have console.read key to read some input from the end user. Up on the top right here, I have an if-else block that shows you how you can have conditional operators. So in this case, we have if new value equals 1. If you recall, we have a double equals to make sure that we're verifying a value rather than assigning a value. And next we have an else if statement. Note that else and if are separated as two different words. We can have as many else if statements that we want, or we can have none at all. And finally, we can have an else statement that wraps up your if statement. You can only have one else statement or one else block per if statement. So as long as the condition is true, it will only run that specific if block. So if new value is 1, it'll only run this first part where it says value is 1. If new value is 2, it'll run the second part and so on. When you have an if-else statement, every block will never run at the same time because only one of them will be true. If more than one is true, it'll run the first one that it encounters. So let's say I have a new value is equals to 1, and in the next one I say if new value is greater than 0, if I were to say greater than 0, it will actually run the first one and will never go to the next one. And finally, we have switch case statements on the lower right. Switch case statements are a way to replace if-else blocks. Instead of having if value equals 1, if value equals 2, I have case statements. And this case statements shows that when the case is 1, or rather when new value has a value of 1, then we print out the value as 1 with console.write line. We have this break statement here to show that we're just ending the first case. Now, above the break statement, you can have one or more lines. Similar to case 1, we have case 2, where you can have one or more lines followed by break. And the bottom part here says default. Now, default is just like an else block in an if-else statement. If none of the above holds true for a condition, it drops down to the default block and will print out whatever we have on the last line. We can also have more than one line right above the final break statement. So just like if-else blocks, we can convert it to a switch case statement as long as we have some sort of numeric value. All right, now let's take a look at a quick demo